you've kind of done so much to kind of quietly share and help so many people for so many years, and we just kind of wanted to talk with you so you could share your story with us about how you got started with your group. If you could tell us about the group and kind of why you started it and what your story is.
Okay, well, it was October 31st, 1986. My best friend took her life. And of course, being so long ago, there was no talk about suicide. It was a taboo. Well, it is now too. But so it was 2 years after she had passed, I ran into someone that lost their father. And she said the same thing. It was so horrible. There's no place to go. What do we do? So found a church that donated a room for us to meet at. And we've been meeting at the same church for 30 years.
Oh my gosh, 30 years you've been doing this. Yeah. So how did you, decide to get started? What did you go through when that happened to you?
What I went through, suicide is a loss like no other. I lost my grandmother to cancer. I lost 2 uncles to cancer. I lost my father, who I was very, very close to dementia. And that was very horrible. But a suicide loss is just different. So not having anywhere to go or anyone to talk to about it, something had to be done. There had to be some place for people to go. So I started attending a lot of conferences that were put on by American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And I bought books, anything I could find on suicide, to educate myself so I could help others. And that's how the group got started.
Do you mind sharing kind of what happened with your friend? What was her name or?
Her name was Connie. She lived in Conestoga. I spoke to her the night before she took her life. I had just picked up our train tickets. We were going to Florida for a week, that coming Thanksgiving. So her and I were going to take the train down, and her parents and another couple, the train actually went right into Kissimmee, where SeaWorld was, and that's where they were going to pick us up. And the reason we were taking the train was we didn't want to ride with the old people, We wanted to, take the train and have a good time. And she said that she was going to go out after work. She thought that there might be a problem or something. And I, of course, being her friend, was like, go ahead, you'll have a good time, don't worry about it. And then the next day I get a call. They found her in the garage, and she had died by carbon monoxide. She had pulled her mom's car in the garage and then backed her car in and then sat up against the bumper of our mom's car and just sat there till she died.
And you had no idea?
No idea. And that was, I had a lot of guilt for a long time, because I kept playing that last conversation over and over again in my mind, thinking that there might have been a word or something that I missed. And for years, I just never could come up with anything. So I was angry, because you think your friend, we confided everything. I knew everything about her, and she knew everything about me. And she was engaged to get married, but it was more out of sympathy for the guy than it was to really get married. So she really didn't want to get married. That's why she asked me to go to Florida instead of her fiance. And so it was just a lot of anger, a lot of guilt. A couple months ago, I went to a psychic for the first time. I had a few people from the support group have been going to psychics, and they've been getting really good responses. Most of them have. There have been 1 or 2 that haven't had a good response. So I thought, well, I want to go. So I went, and Connie came through, and she said that she was suffering from depression but couldn't tell anybody. And that day, she just felt like she couldn't take it anymore and did what she did. So that made me feel a little bit better. you know. For years, I tried to dream, so I get a dream about her. And I looked up online on how to, things to do to make yourself dream. And I did all kinds of stuff. I had really weird, bizarre dreams, but none of her. And it was about 2 years ago, out of the blue, I had a dream. I was walking down the alley in Lancaster where the dispensing company is. And the door was open. And I'm with some people just walking down through and look in, and there she is sitting in there in like a white sundress. Ran in, gave her a hug. She said she's fine, and the dream was over.
When you said that you researched a lot after her death about suicide before kind of starting the group and finding the church, what were some of the things, I guess, how did you get started when you first started the group? What were some of the things that you were hoping to accomplish or to talk about with people?
Well, I just wanted people to know that they didn't have to go through this alone. And that's, after all these years, that's the biggest feedback I get from people, is they're so grateful to be somewhere where everybody else knows how they feel. Because like I said, it is a very different loss. Suicide's a very different loss. And it's especially hard on the person when they find the person that took their life. So it's a lot to, and then there's a lot of course, the what ifs. I mean, and I go through that a little bit, but not too much. Like, would we still be friends? Would she be married? Have kids? Yeah. That kind of thing. And people that lose a child, especially, they lose all those what ifs, and yeah, they lose all, yeah. So it was just mainly, I just wanted to be prepared the best I could be to help somebody else. I didn't want to jump into that, with not knowing a little bit of what I was doing. Right. So I wanted to at least, plus it helped me heal a lot too, by doing all the reading and attending the conferences and things like that. Yeah, it helped me a lot.
Do you still attend conferences and do things like that, or?
No, not too much anymore. I do health conferences. There's a girl at MHA in Lancaster that I do these QPR trainings, and it means question, persuade, refer, and it's a 3-hour class on how to de-escalate someone right now that's in crisis. Okay. So it's just so you question the person, you persuade them to get help, and then you refer them for help. So it's sort of a quick little class on getting someone help in crisis right away. So I work closely with them. So when they go to health fairs and things like that, I usually go along, and then I'll set a table up of all the information I have and handouts and stuff about the support group.
So it's a cause that's still, even after all this time, kind of near and dear to your heart?
Well, I'm afraid it's always going to be, yeah. It's like a part-time job, but I wouldn't, I can't see myself not doing it.
Yeah. What's your regular job? You don't mind.
Regular job? No, that's okay. My regular job is I'm a night shift supervisor for traumatic brain injury.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I work with people that have had a traumatic brain injury.
You're helping people in both of your jobs.
My first job, believe it or not, I was a bridge welder for 25 years. Wow. Yeah. So I went from that, big jump. I went from that to behavioral health. Okay. And worked in there for 6 years. And then the traumatic brain injury job came up, so I've been there for 9 years.
Okay, so I'm curious about this. Have you noticed with the support group, as the years have gone by with the internet, has there been kind of an increase in attendance? Like, have people talked about it more? I feel like I've heard about it more with social media, especially with kids, I guess just because I have teenagers, and it seems to be a common thing that people talk about now, where...
Yes, that's one thing that has changed. Schools have programs now, so that came a long way. I remember way back when I started working with AFSP, they were trying to get the black label warning parents put on medications, and that got finally through. They were trying to get insurance companies to do something with the waiver as far as not paying for a suicide or something like that. And now I think most of them have like a 2 or 3 year, waiting period or something like that. So that changed. So,
Is there anything you would tell people who maybe know someone who maybe has made comments, or if someone has a friend or family member that they're worried about, what should someone like that do to maybe help that person? Is there anywhere they could go to reach out?
Well, I would definitely get them to talk and want to know what they're thinking, because sometimes people can just go through a depressive episode without really suffering from depression. So sometimes it could be somebody's just gone through a really bad time and they just feel, really very despondent, and things aren't going well right now, and not really suicidal. But perfect example, I was leaving for work one night, and one of the neighbors here had opened their door and said, "You might want to check on me in the morning, I might not be here." And I thought, well, that's the absolute wrong thing to say to me.
Yeah.
So my first thought was, crap. And I was already outside because I was on my way out to the car. And I put my stuff down, I called work, said I'm going to be late, and I called 911 right away. Because they were drinking and they were taking pills. So, I personally don't take any comments for granted, because if I don't know someone that well, I don't know what state they're actually in at that time. The thing that made me angry was when I followed the ambulance in, when they took them into the hospital, until I got in there and walked in the room, the doctor came walking in and asked them if they were still suicidal. They said no. He said, "Okay, you can go," and handed them a paper. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, this is it?
Yeah.
And he said, well, yeah, they can't do anything. So that's very disheartening.
That's frustrating.
Yeah. And for about a year, they didn't talk to me at all. They were very angry that I did that. But again, I'd rather have them angry at me than not be here.
That would be dead, yeah. So
it's knowing the person. I mean, on how well you know the person. But I personally don't take anything for granted. And even if it's a stranger, sometimes, for example, I was in Colorado last year for 2 weeks, and I'm sitting on the plane, and I have this zebra tattoo. And this lady walked down the aisle, and she said, "Oh, I really like your tattoos." And then she, what do they mean? So, I explained about the sea turtles, and then there's a poem that I give out. It's called A Zebra Among Horses. And it's about people that lost someone to suicide. We're like everybody, but we're not like everybody. So you're like a zebra among horses. Wow. So, I mean, here we are, 30,000 feet in the air, whatever. And next thing you know, there's 5 people all in the aisle, and we're talking about suicide. People were talking about family members that were suffering from depression. And it was just amazing. You never know who you're going to meet, or who you might touch or connect with, or something like that.
Are there any particular stories that impacted you with the group that you've run for so long? You don't have to share names or anything, but any particular stories of people that have been helped by the group that that have stuck with you over the years?
I have a lady that comes now. She's been coming for 4 years. I have people that come 2-3 years usually. It usually takes, believe it or not, 2 to 3 years till you get acclimated to your new life. Yeah. Because once that person dies, your life is no longer the same. So you're going to have a first of everything. Their first birthday, their anniversary, the Christmas and the holidays. And again, if it's a child, it's graduation, it's prom.
Is it hard for you personally? Do you feel like it keeps your personal pain going to experience everyone else's pain for this long?
In the beginning, it's like the elephant in the room. It takes up the entire room. You cannot get away from it. But for me, now, as long as it's now just a little knick-knack sitting up on the shelf. It's always going to be there. It's never going to go away. But for me, it's not all-consuming. A few years back, we had a mock emergency at work. And so opened up this door, and they had a dummy hanging. And so you had to go in and hold the dummy up, and the other person, took the belt off, whatever. And when I stood back, because you had to call the nurse, you had to get the crash cart, everything, and it was like a real, emergency. Standing there watching that, I had a flashback, and I had to leave. I couldn't. It was just too overwhelming. I could see her laying there. I could see the paramedics. I could see everything, and it just brought everything right back. And even though it's been as long as it's been, I can close my eyes and I can still see that day like it was yesterday. That doesn't change. I have a picture of her in my bookcase, and pictures of friends and family and stuff, and people would come over and they're like, oh, who's that? Who's that? Who's that? And Connie was a very pretty girl. And they would say like, whoa, who's that? And I'd say, oh, well, that was my friend Connie. And sometimes that'd be it. Nobody'd say anything. And then some people would pick up on like, was. Like, oh, what do you mean was? And then I would say, oh, well, she died. And then again, it might just end there, it might not. And then they would say, well, how'd she die? And I would say suicide. And I've actually had somebody ask me, why do you still have her picture? Like, okay, well, we were best friends. And these people are more than the way they died. They died because they were in some kind of pain, so they shouldn't be, almost chastised or whatever, because of that. That's so, yeah, just trying to break a lot of stigmas there, with that.
Where can people find the group that meets?
We meet at St. Peter. I can give you a brochure. If you guys want a brochure, I can give you a brochure to take with you. We meet at St. Peter's Lutheran Church. Okay. It's at the corner of Delp Road and Letters Pike. And we meet the first and third Thursday of every month. Okay. And the meetings run from 7:30 to roughly 9. But then it usually ends up going out into the parking lot because a lot of times you just can't cover everything, in that hour and a half.
And anyone can come who's been impacted.
Anyone can come. High school and up.